this is a conversation that is happening right now as it pertains to Caps. It started as, is he the best mid laner in the world, or in that conversation, or in the West, I should say, sorry. And then it started as, is he the best player in the West, period? And then it became, is he the best player from the West of all time in League of Legends? Where do we land on that conversation?
The answer
I mean,
is yes.
I think he's the best player in the West right now.
No, he's best Western player of all time. There's no argument there. Look at, I posted it on Twitter. Look at his last 6 years. He's been in 6 LEC seasons the last 3 years. He's won every single one of them. He's been to 2 MSIs. He's won 1, got 3rd, 4th in the other. He's been to 2 Worlds, and he's been silver medalist twice. He's the only Western player to ever go back-to-back Western finals.
Different teams, by the way.
On 2 different teams.
Rival teams.
He's the greatest Western player of all time. The only argument against him is perks, and I think you need to have a very nuanced argument on perks' his selflessness, him being a captain, and how the intangibles might sway that argument over to perks, where he is, he gave his natural role to satisfy Caps, and we've seen that Perks is a better AD carry than Caps. You can say maybe that Perks is a better all-around player. He brings a leadership role that Caps doesn't. But in just terms of a game-breaking type of player, and I remember this, and I remember back in 2015, 2014, 2016, and people thought this was Bjergsen. They thought maybe he could be that player, because we've seen Faker, and we've seen Dade, and we've seen these game-breaking players, and I remember we've always, in the West, it was always like, when are we going to find that kind of player? When are we going to have our Faker? When are we going to have our Dade? When are we going to have a player who can 1v9, who can change an entire script in a millisecond? Like, where are these, this prodigy type player that not only great in the West, not only a great Western player, but a great international world-class superstar? And I think Caps has shown the last 3 years really, that he is that type of player. That he is not only a superstar Western player, but he's a superstar no matter where he is. He is a player that's talents are just as good as, he's mechanically as good as any other player in the world, and he's improved and he's matured as a player. Like, it's insane of how much he's not only improved as a player, but as a person in the last few years. And seeing his growth and interviewing the guy and seeing him just grow from tournament to tournament, there's no question. And this guy grinds this game like almost no other. Like, as someone who's interviewed Caps and Faker throughout the years, like they do share a lot of similarities. And when you ask both of them, like, what do you like to do outside of League of Legends? Like, do you go to, the movies, or like, what do you do fun? It's like, their fun time is playing more League of Legends. Their fun is finding new ways to master the game. Like, it's fun for them when they can sit down and play a game of League of Legends. They feel like they got something new to their arsenal. Where these guys aren't just playing the game, they're masters of the game. And, like, this game isn't only their profession, but it's their life as a whole. And everything else, a lot of times, is just white noise. And for me, Caps is the greatest Western player of all time. We can put on nostalgia glasses and try to act like the players of old, and, Season 1 tournaments matter, but Caps is the greatest Western player of all time. Perks is number 2. The sky's the limit. Like, it's scary. Like, before long, we're gonna have to say Wonder and Yankos are 3 and 4. Like, there's a world where in the next few years, where all 5 G2 players, we just say, yeah, 1 to 5, these are the greatest Western players of all time. They're that damn good.
So I think the 2 things that I want to bring up in this discussion are, the first is just general criteria for top 20. So mine is top 20 going into Worlds 2020 from this regular season, which is why I don't necessarily count Caps' previous performances. Someone else might, but I'm just saying, as individual criteria, we're probably all going to be bringing our own criteria to the table. So that's something to keep in mind. The second thing is that I think there are 3 players actually that can be considered for this. It's Caps, it's Perks, as you mentioned, and it's also, I feel like you have to mention Rekkles here. He has been, and like, this isn't like a low early tournaments thing. He was in my opinion, still like definitely the best tournament of its time, one of the best tournaments of all time, given storylines and just how many like really basic League of Legends concepts we saw growing during this tournament. in IPL 5, which happened after the Season 2 World Championship. And he was too young to play in the LCS, initially, the EU LCS. And that's how long Rekkles has been around, and he has been consistently at the top. And I know like people have very like Rekkles is a very polarizing person. There's this Rekkles is like way overhyped, and then there's this backlash where Rekkles is the best player in the world, and it doesn't seem like people it seems like people kind of vacillate wildly between those two things. But I do think if you're going to have a conversation about best Western player of all time, then Rekkles should certainly be in that conversation. That being said, my personal pick, and this is again going off of like intangibles in addition to performance. So while I would say that Caps is a more like probably mechanically skilled player at this point, my vote would actually be for Perks. I think he is G2, and he has been G2 since he like came onto this organization. It's not just selflessness, but a really fundamental understanding of the game and how to play the game that has allowed him to make that role swap so successful. And there are very few players that would be able to do that with the greatest amount of success that Perks has had, and additionally have been able to go contend for a world's title. Like, yes, people tend to write off G2's entire season just based on their Worlds performance last year, which I think is really unfair. It's kind of similar to how I was mad that people were writing off RNG's 2018 because they lost at Worlds. I don't think people should discredit how good G2 were for the majority of last year. They were the team of 2019. And I say this as an LPL fan too, so you know. Yep. I think that like Perks, it's really tough between Perks and Caps. I think Rekkles should also be in that conversation, and I think it really comes down to your criteria and how much you do value a lot of intangibles. Because like for example, when we saw Caps role swap, right? We saw him understand, like there would be times where you would see him like setting the wave exactly correctly, right? Like you could tell he understood exactly how he like should play, and the execution just wasn't as high level, and his overall understanding of the map wasn't as high level as Perks was, in my opinion, and that's what makes Perks such a successful like swap. He was just a lot more comfortable in that position from the get-go. But you can see that Cap still has like a really good fundamental understanding of like how League of Legends should be played. So it's an interesting conversation. I think you have to look at a lot of minutia when they play on the map, and you can compare their mid lane and their bot lane. So that's kind of fun.
So I think Perks is the best Western player of all time. I think Caps is the best Western player in the world right now. Between NA and EU, he is the best player combined in those regions. Caps has had a banner summer. Obviously, he won the MVP, and I'm not just saying it because of that. Because I think, to Emily's point, he looked really messy in the spring. Right, like it was clear that he was a much better mid laner than he is an AD carry, and he wasn't even just a much better mid laner; he was a dominant mid laner. What a like banner season for him, MVP or not, right? Like if somebody else would have won that award in a different position, like Caps is still the best mid laner in all of Europe, and I think that to Tyler's point, like that success the past few years has really sort of like it keeps continuing to compound. Perks has done it for longer though. And much like Rekkles, actually, Perks could have been in the league sooner if not for Atrils. Perks was hindered by that too, right? Like Perks' first season in the EU LCS was the first season he was old enough to play. And I knew Perks back then, and I would say he probably wasn't mature enough as an individual to play in the EU LCS at a high level until the season he actually came into it. But still, I think that Caps is a better player right now, but I think that historically, if you look at the entire thing, it is Perks.